My name is Ren Calloway, and I have spent the last 3 years of my life pretending to be someone I am not. Every single morning, before I leave my room, I press a scent blocker patch behind my left ear. It is a small square of pale, skin-colored material, invisible under my hair, and it costs me 40 credits a week on a budget that is already stretched thin. Then I button my collar up to the last button. Then I stand in front of the mirror and practice the expression. Loose jaw, soft eyes, shoulders that carry nothing. The beta face, the face that says, I am not important, I am not a threat, please look somewhere else. Betas are the middle designation, not alpha, not omega. They do not lead and they are not hunted. The world does not care much about them, which means the world does not do much to them either. That is the entire point. My name is Ren Calloway, and I am not a beta. I am an omega. I am also a very, very angry person on a very specific mission, and I have exactly 1 school year to complete it before I age out of the junior enrollment window. Let me explain. Crestfall Academy is not a normal school. It is a ranked institution in a world where your secondary designation, alpha, beta, or omega, shapes every corner of your life before you even open your mouth. Which table you sit at in the cafeteria, which extracurricular clubs will accept your application, whether the teacher calls on you first because you might have something brilliant to say, or last because they have already decided you probably do not. Alphas run everything. Betas exist quietly. Omegas, if they are unlucky enough to be known as such, get ground down into nothing by a system that was never built to hold them upright. I know this because it happened to my brother, Cale Calloway, Omega, one of the most intelligent people I have ever met. And I do not say that because he is family. I say it because Cale had a scholarship to Crestfall, a research prize nomination in his first semester, and a future that looked like it was finally going to open up and become something real. He was kind and careful, and he worked twice as hard as anyone around him, because Omegas always have to. Then the Voss Pack noticed him. Within 1 semester, Cale's scholarship had been reassigned to someone else. His research nomination had been quietly removed. His reputation had been shredded through rumors so casual and consistent that even the teachers started looking at him differently. By spring, Kyle had withdrawn from Crestfall. By summer, he had moved out of the country entirely, just to put enough distance between himself and the shape of what had happened. He called me on the night before he left. He said, "Ren, please just let it go. It is not worth it." I told him I would. I lied. The Voss Pack is led by one person, and that person is the reason I'm here. Calum Voss, Alpha, top of every academic ranking. Tall and sharp-featured with silver-gray eyes that miss absolutely nothing, and a voice that can silence a hallway without being raised. He walks through Crestfall like the school was built specifically for him, which, given that his family funds about 40% of its operating budget, is not entirely wrong. Every teacher defers to him. Every student gives him space. Even other alphas fold slightly when he walks into a room, and not because of his scent alone. It is something colder than that, more deliberate. I have hated him since I was 15 years old and watched my brother come home with shaking hands. Now I'm 18, enrolled under a false beta designation, carrying 3 years of research, a plan outlined in a worn blue notebook, and a very specific goal: find documentary proof that Calum Voss used his family's influence to steal my brother's scholarship, destroyed his academic reputation through coordinated social pressure, and then used the Voss family's relationship with the school board to ensure the whole thing was buried without consequence. Then I expose it. Publicly. Completely. I give my brother his name back. Simple. Clean. No messy detours, no emotional complications. That was the plan. The problem started on day one. I was standing at my locker on the first morning, still finding my orientation, when someone slammed into it from the side, hard enough to rattle the door shut. I turned around, already ready to be annoyed, and then everything in my chest did something completely stupid because Caleb Voss was standing right there, not across a room, not in a photograph or a yearbook. Right there, close enough that I could see the precise gray of his eyes and smell his alpha scent, cedar and cold morning air. And he was looking at me with the detached assessment of someone cataloging whether a new object in his environment was interesting or irrelevant. New transfer, he said. Not a question. A categorization. Ren Calloway, I said. My voice was flat. I had spent 3 years practicing flat. He looked me over once, slow and clinical. Then he stepped back exactly one step. Beta, he said, confirming it to himself. Fine. One rule for new students. Stay out of the East Corridor after 7 in the evening. That wing belongs to the Voss pack. He walked away without waiting for my response. I stood there and watched him go, and felt something hot and furious rise up my throat. I had spent 3 years preparing to walk straight into this boy's world and dismantle it piece by piece. And within 40 seconds of meeting me, he was already drawing lines around territory and telling me where I was not allowed to stand. Good, I thought, forcing myself to breathe normally. I was going to enjoy making his life very complicated. The first week was mostly orientation. Crestfall was larger than I'd expected. Older architecture, high stone corridors, a library that took up an entire building of its own. The classes were difficult, which suited me fine, because academics had never been where I struggled. I found my footing quickly and quietly. I also made 2 unexpected acquaintances. The first was Jory Park, a cheerful beta boy who sat across from me at lunch on the second day and immediately began talking like we had known each other for years. He knew everyone, had opinions about everything, and adopted me with a warmth that I had not prepared for and was not sure how to handle. The second was Sasha, a quiet omega who sat beside me in literature and communicated mostly through written notes on the corner of their notebook. The first note said, "Caleb is looking at you again. That is the 3rd time this class." Interesting, no? I wrote back. You are imagining it. Sasha underlined the word interesting and did not respond. I told myself Sasha was wrong, but then it happened again on Thursday. I was in the library copying notes from the archive section. Carefully, quietly, moving methodically through the old faculty records, when I felt the specific uncomfortable awareness of being observed. I looked up. Caleb was sitting 2 tables away, and he was watching me over the top of his open book with an expression I could not immediately read. I looked back down. My hands stayed completely still. My face stayed completely calm. Inside, every nerve was shouting. What I did not plan for was him standing up, crossing the room, now and sitting down directly across from me without a single word of warning. You are looking in the wrong section, he said. I stared at him. I'm sorry? The records you want are not organized by department. They are organized by faculty year, starting from the school's founding. You have been searching the wrong index for at least 40 minutes. He said it simply, the way someone points out that you have taken the wrong road. Not unkind, just factual. I went completely still on the inside while keeping my expression mild on the outside. He had been watching me for 40 minutes. Thank you, I said, careful and even. He nodded once, picked up his bag, left. I sat there for a long time after he was gone, staring at the empty chair across from me, turning the interaction over in my head from every angle. Caleb Voss had just unknowingly pointed me closer to the exact records I needed to build a case against him. I should have felt like I was winning. I should have felt the clean satisfaction of a plan moving forward. Instead, there was something strange and uncomfortable sitting in the center of my chest, and I did not like what it felt like even a little. I opened my notebook, turned to the page with his name at the top, and wrote 2 new lines. Observant, precise, helps without being asked, motive unclear. Then, after a pause, more dangerous than I prepared for. I closed the notebook. I should have been worried about the plan. I was. I genuinely was. But some small, unhelpful part of my brain kept replaying the way he had sat down across from me like it was nothing, and I could not seem to make it stop. I went to the East Corridor on Friday night because I had been told not to. That is the honest answer. The practical answer is that the East Wing housed a secondary archive room that was only accessible through PAC-approved channels, and I needed those files. But if I am being fully truthful, some part of me also went, because Caleb Voss had drawn a line in front of me on the first day of school, and I have never once in my life been able to leave a line like that alone. Jury had grabbed my arm at lunch and said, "Ren, I am serious. No one goes into the East Corridor uninvited, not even upper year betas. The Voss Pack claimed that wing 2 years ago, and the school administration just let them. It is like a whole separate country in there." He had looked genuinely concerned, which I appreciated even as I ignored him. Sasha from across the table had said simply, "If you go, take something warm. The heating in that wing is inconsistent," and then returned to eating their soup without further comment. I took a jacket. The East Corridor turned out to be nothing like my imagination had built it. I think I had expected something theatrical. Mood lighting, leather furniture, alphas draped around looking powerful and bored. Instead, it was a wide, practical study hall with tall windows that let in the gray evening light. Wooden tables covered in open textbooks and scattered notes. Exactly 4 people in the room, all of them working in near silence. One of them was Caleb. His head came up the instant I stepped through the doorway. I watched the sequence of his expressions. Surprise, assessment, something that resolved into a kind of careful neutrality. And then he set his pen down on the table. "I told you to stay out of this corridor," he said. His voice was even, not angry, more like someone confirming that a thing they noticed had in fact occurred. "I need East Wing archive access," I said, staying in the doorway. Something told me walking further into the room without being acknowledged would go badly. The head librarian told me the secondary files can only be requested through a PAC member's approval. I checked the school policy. That is accurate. A beat of silence spread through the room. One of the other boys, Devon, broad-shouldered and openly curious, the Voss Pack's second, leaned back in his chair and watched us with the undisguised interest of someone who had just found the evening more entertaining than expected. Caleb stood and crossed the room toward me at a measured pace. He stopped close enough to speak quietly, and the cedar and cold air scent reached me immediately, warm from the study hall rather than cold from the corridor, and I was acutely aware of my scent blocker and my heartbeat and the fact that I was standing very still and hoping my face was communicating nothing at all. "What files?" he said. "Faculty performance reviews from 3 academic years ago," I said. The lie came smooth and rehearsed. "I am writing an independent research paper on how school administration measures and enforces academic integrity across different designation groups. It is for my senior research credit." I had prepared this explanation for exactly this moment. I had practiced it in the mirror. I had anticipated every possible follow-up question. Caleb looked at me for a long, unhurried moment. His expression gave nothing away. "That is a very specific thesis for someone who only just arrived," he said. "I am a very specific person," I said. Something shifted in his eyes. Still unreadable, but different. Like a door not opening, but acknowledging that someone had knocked. "Fine," he said. "I will approve the archive request. But you come back here tomorrow morning at 9 and explain your full research methodology to me. If the thesis holds, I sign the access form." I blinked once. "You want me to explain my methodology?" "Packspace gives me co-approval rights over restricted archive requests. That is in the school charter, Section 9. He tilted his head just slightly. "If you would prefer to file through standard student channels, the processing time is 4 to 6 weeks. Your choice, Calloway." He had me in a clean corner, and from the very small, very controlled shift in his expression, he was entirely aware of it. "9 tomorrow," I said. "Fine." I turned to leave. "Calloway." I stopped but did not turn around. Something in his tone had changed, quieter, more careful, like he was deciding whether to say the next thing. "You smell like cedar," he said. "Betas do not usually carry that particular base note. It is more common in omega scent blocker compounds." My entire body went ice cold from the inside out. I did not move. I did not turn around. "It is my soap," I said. My voice was perfectly steady. Years of practice in a single sentence. "Good night, Voss." I walked out at a normal speed. I kept it measured through the corridor, through the adjoining hallway, through the next turn. Then I pressed my back against the wall in an empty corridor 3 wings away and stood very still and breathed. The scent blocker was working. It had to be. If it had failed, the reaction would have been different. Alphas responded to omega scent in ways that were immediate and physical, a stiffening, a sharpening of attention. He had not reacted like that. He had been calm, curious. He had filed it away like a note. I walked back to my dorm and sat on the floor and wrote in my notebook for a long time. At the bottom of the page, I added, "He notices everything and says nothing immediately. This is worse than someone who reacts." The next morning, I arrived at the East Corridor at 9 exactly with my fake thesis outline and my most neutral expression. Caleb was alone. The room felt different with just him in it. Larger and quieter and somehow more pressurized. There were 2 cups of coffee on the table when I arrived, and one of them was obviously for me, and I had not expected that and did not know the right move to make. So I sat down and pushed the cup gently to the side and watched him watch me do it. He said nothing about the coffee. I started talking. The fake thesis was solid. I had built it carefully over months, full of real academic language and logical structure. It should have been a smooth presentation. And it was. For the first few minutes. Then he started asking real questions. Not surface questions. Actual sharp, engaged questions about methodology, source bias, whether I had accounted for the fact that the archival records from that period might be incomplete due to a board-level restructure that occurred 18 months afterward. I stopped. I looked at him. He was wrong about the restructure timeline. I knew he was wrong because I had researched this obsessively for 3 years, and I am constitutionally incapable of allowing incorrect information to sit in front of me without saying something about it. So I corrected him, directly, with 3 specific dates and a reference to a secondary source he had not considered. He went quiet. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen from him before. Not suspicion, not assessment, genuine interest. "You know considerably more about this than a transfer student should," he said. I told you, I am a specific person. He looked at me for another beat. Then he signed the access form and slid it across the table without further comment. I picked it up, stood, reached for my bag. "Thank you for the coffee," I said. I did not touch it, but the gesture was noted. "You did not touch it," he repeated. "I do not accept things I did not ask for." "Interesting principle," he said. I left. In the corridor, I leaned against the wall for exactly 4 seconds, eyes closed. He is a person, Ren. He is not a symbol. Stop letting him be interesting. You are here for one reason. I pushed off the wall and went to the archive room. His face, patient and precise and unexpectedly there, sat in the back of my mind all morning and refused to leave. Jory told me about the pack mixer on Thursday, which gave me 2 days to decide whether going was strategically useful. It was. Of course it was. Pack mixers were monthly social events where all designation groups were theoretically required to mingle in a spirit of institutional harmony. In practice, they were intelligence gatherings. Everyone watching everyone else, noting alliances, reading the social architecture of who stood next to whom and who avoided whom, and who was brave enough or foolish enough to cross the invisible designation lines that governed everything here. I needed to understand that architecture. The mixer was useful. That was the only reason I ironed my shirt carefully on Saturday evening and told myself 3 times that I was not doing anything other than working. The event was held in the main social hall, which had been decorated with string lights that made everything glow amber and warm. Music floated underneath the noise of conversation. It should have felt welcoming. It felt, as most things at Crestfall did, like a performance everyone had agreed to stage. I found a position near the east-facing windows, good sight line over the room, close enough to the refreshment table to look natural, and held a drink I was not drinking and watched. The alphas clustered near the center without visibly trying to, the way gravity works. You do not notice it pulling everything until you look for it. Calum was among them, in conversation with Davin and 2 others from his pack, dressed in dark clothes that somehow made him look sharper than everyone around him. He was not performing the way some of the other alphas were, doing loud laughing and large gestures. He was just present, still, taking up a specific amount of space and no more. Sasha materialized beside me without warning, which was the thing Sasha did. "He has looked at you 3 times since you walked in," they said by way of greeting. "You need a real hobby," I said. "This is my real hobby." Sasha sipped their drink. "You know, there is a thing you do where you stand in the middle of a crowd and arrange yourself to look unbothered, and it ends up drawing more attention than the people who are trying to be noticed. You have been doing it since you arrived. It is fascinating." I felt a cold drip of alarm at that. I had specifically been trying to stay beneath the social radar. "I will work on being more forgettable." Said Sasha, in the tone of someone who did not believe that was possible, and then they drifted away into the crowd like they had never been there. I turned, and Calum was standing directly in front of me. He had crossed the room while I was talking to Sasha. He was close, closer than the casual social distance people maintained at these events, and there was something slightly deliberate about where he had placed himself, though his expression gave away nothing at all. "You were standing on the wrong side of the room," he said. I looked around briefly. "The beta attendees are on this side." "I know," he said. I waited for a follow-up. None came. He simply looked at me with that patient, unreadable expression. "What do you want, Voss?" I asked. A small pause. "Dance with me," he said. Whatever response I had been preparing evaporated completely. My brain reset. "What?" The school board community liaison is present tonight. She is conducting an observation for the upcoming Designation Integration Funding Review. He said it with perfect practicality, like he was explaining a homework deadline. If the VOSPAC Alpha participates in cross-designation social engagement, specifically dances with a beta transfer student, it improves the school's integration score by a statistically meaningful margin. It is politics. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. He was asking me to dance for administrative scoring purposes, and yet he had crossed the entire room to ask me specifically. I filed that detail away. Fine, I said, because making a scene was not part of the plan. We moved to the open floor. I had taken social dance classes as part of my beta cover. It was expected, culturally standard, part of making the designation believable. So my feet understood the slow, formal pattern of the song, even while every other part of me was loudly and unhelpfully occupied elsewhere. His hand settled on my waist. Mine went to his shoulder. We moved. He was a good dancer, controlled and precise without being stiff. Of course he was. You are tense, he said, low enough that it was just for me. I'm fine. You were holding your breath for the first 8 counts. I breathed deliberately. I felt slightly ridiculous doing it. Better, he said, and the word came out in a tone that was not teasing, almost careful. The way you speak to something you do not want to startle. I looked up at him because I had been deliberately avoiding it, and that was a mistake because he was already looking down at me, and we were close. Closer than the dance technically required, and the cedar warm scent was different from across a table, softer somehow. And the song was slow, and the light was amber, and his eyes were... His gaze dropped to my mouth. 1 second. Just one. Then back up. The liaison is watching, he said, very even. Right, I said. Integration scores. Yes, he agreed. But neither of us moved apart. We stayed exactly where we were, turning slowly in the amber light, and I was aware of every point of contact. His hand, my shoulder, the specific warmth of standing this close to someone. And my heartbeat was doing something completely unprofessional. Then Devon appeared at Caleb's side with loud energy, and a group of people in the moment came apart like glass tapping a hard floor. And I stepped back and found the edge of the room and stood there feeling like I had touched a live wire. I found Sasha 9 minutes later. Nothing is happening, I told them, preemptively. Sasha looked at my face with the slow evaluation of someone reading a page they have already memorized. Of course, they said. Absolutely nothing. I went back to my room and opened my blue notebook and stared at the plan laid out across 3 pages. Every step still clear. Every goal still in place. I did not write anything new. But I sat there for a very long time before I could sleep. And when I finally did, I dreamed about amber light and cedar in a single second where someone's eyes dropped to my mouth like it was something worth noticing. I woke up annoyed at myself and got on with the morning. The kiss happened because of an argument, which in retrospect was the most honest way it could have happened between us. Not a soft, romantic moment in good lighting. Not a careful, intentional decision. An argument in a hallway, with papers scattered across the floor and 3 years of buried anger finally cracking the surface. Let me go back 2 days. I had found the records. Not everything. The file had clear, deliberate gaps, pages that had been removed rather than misfiled, blank spaces where documentation should have been. But enough. Enough to see the shape of what had been done to Kale. A scholarship competition result that had been quietly altered after the winner was announced. A faculty recommendation letter for Kyle that had been intercepted and replaced. A performance review for one of Kyle's supporting professors that contained a single line: reconsider advocacy for high-profile Omega students in context of donor relations. 3 years of suspicion, and there it was in faded ink, confirming every single thing I had believed. I had printed the copies carefully, organized them in a folder, and was walking to the student affairs office to formally request access to the next batch of restricted documents when I turned a corner and walked directly and completely into Calum Voss. Papers everywhere, both of us reaching down to collect them at the same time. His hand landed on the printed scholarship records. He picked them up without thinking. He turned them over. He read the header. He went very still. I took them back, pressing them to my chest, watching his face go through something quiet and fast and controlled. He stood. I stood. The hallway was empty. Just us and the low hum of the ventilation and the sound of a class in session somewhere far away. Those are scholarship reassignment records, he said. His voice was careful. From 3 years ago. My research paper, I said. Those are not faculty performance reviews. He looked at me. Why do you have these, Calloway? The thing about carrying a secret for 3 years is that it becomes its own kind of weight. Not just the information itself, but the constant performance of not having it. The daily maintenance of a face that says nothing is wrong, I am just a beta, I have no history here. And standing in that hallway with the evidence in my arms, and him right in front of me and the end of my rope, finally actually, running out. Because Cale Calloway is my brother, I said. And your pack destroyed him. The silence that followed was total. Calum's expression shifted in a way I had not seen before. Not the cold assessment, not the careful interest, something older and heavier than both of those. Cale, he said, very quietly, like he was placing the name in a specific memory. Yes, Cale, the Omega student your family pushed out 3 years ago. My voice was steady, but it cost me. I have the records, the altered results, the intercepted recommendations, the donor relations note. I have the shape of exactly what was done to him, and I came here to prove the rest. You think I did that? His voice was still quiet, controlled, but something in it had roughed at the edges. I know someone in this pack did. Then you should know something. He took one step closer. His jaw was tight. It was not me. Everyone says that. I said it was not me. Not louder, just harder. Final. The way a door closing is final. It was my father, and I have spent 2 years knowing that and not being able to undo it, which is its own particular thing I get to live with. He exhaled once, tightly. The records you have been finding, the gaps in them, someone left those for you to find. Someone inside this school has been building a case against my family for 2 years and has just put you at the front of it without telling you the full story. You are walking into something without all the information. I stared at him. The architecture of my anger, the thing I had built so carefully over 3 years, every brick placed with intention, cracked somewhere in the middle. His father, not him. Prove it, I said, but my voice had lost some of its edge. I will. He said it like a fact. Give me the weekend. I will get you what you need. We were very close now, closer than the dance, closer than the library table. The gap between us had closed without either of us quite noticing, and his eyes were right there, gray and tired and carrying something real. And 3 years of anger, and 3 months of pushing this feeling down, and one too many moments of cedar and cold air, and I kissed him. Or he kissed me. Honestly, I still do not know. We both moved, and the space between us simply stopped existing for 3 seconds that were soft and still and complete. Then we both went rigid with shock. We stepped back at the same time. His expression was open in a way I'd never seen. Mine was, I assume, somewhere between terrified and bewildered. That, I said, with every scrap of dignity I could locate, did not happen. Agreed, he said. His voice was slightly lower than usual and not quite steady. I picked up my folder. I turned around. I walked away at a pace that was technically normal. Halfway down the corridor, I pressed 2 fingers to my mouth and stood there, eyes closed, heart making noise like something had shifted inside a locked room. Then I kept walking. But everything felt different. The hallway, the light, the weight of the folder in my arms. Everything felt different, and I did not know yet whether that was the end of something or the beginning. I avoided Calum for 3 days. This was harder than it had any right to be. Crestfall was a large school, but apparently not large enough to contain 2 people who were both very aware of each other's location. He was in the library on Monday morning when I arrived. He was in the East Cafeteria at exactly the time I'd switched to eating there to avoid the main hall. He was in the corridor outside the science wing on Wednesday, at a time when I had no good reason to be there, and neither did he. And when our eyes met, he simply looked at me with that quiet, waiting expression, and I turned and walked in the other direction and felt his gaze on my back the whole time. I was not sleeping well. This was not about the kiss. I had decided the kiss was an isolated incident caused by accumulated stress and proximity and 3 months of suppressed tension, and it would not happen again. And I was going to treat it like a minor anomaly and continue with the plan. The problem was his words, not the kiss. His words would not leave me alone. It was my father. I went back to the records with that frame and read everything again, and the shape of it changed. The names on the formal documents were not Calum's. They belonged to a school board member with a long history of being listed in the Voss family's charitable donation records. The timing of the scholarship reassignment matched a period when Calum himself had been away at an inter-school academic competition, which meant he had not even been at Crestfall when the decision was made. I found, buried in a folder from 3 years ago, a formal complaint filed by a student, name redacted, objecting to the scholarship committee's process. The complaint had been rejected within 48 hours. The redacted name was 2 letters and a last initial, and the last initial was V. He had filed a complaint, at 18, against his own family's decision, and it had gone nowhere. I sat with that for a long time. On Thursday morning, Jury found me before first class with the expression he wore when the news was serious. Mouth pulled tight, eyes doing the thing where he was trying to figure out how to say something carefully. There has been a formal query filed with the school registrar about your enrollment records, he said. Someone told the board office that your designation documentation may be inconsistent with your assessed social profile. Ren, if they look carefully at your files, my fake beta designation, the scent blocker, 3 months of performance. When is the review? I asked. It is scheduled for Monday. 4 days. I went back to my room and did not panic, which took significant effort. I sat at my desk and looked at everything I had gathered and laid it out honestly. I had enough to suggest wrongdoing. I did not have enough to prove it conclusively. The missing piece, the direct communication between Calum's father and the board member, existed somewhere, but it was not in the school archives. It would be in private records, records that only one person was likely to still have access to. I picked up my phone. I looked at his name in my contacts for a long time. Longer than I would like to admit. Then I typed, I need to talk to you. Tonight, East Corridor. The reply came in less than a minute. I know, I will be there. I walked in at 9 exactly. The east corridor was empty except for him, which meant he had cleared it deliberately, which meant he had anticipated this conversation and prepared for it. I noted that and filed it and sat down across from him. Someone reported my enrollment status, I said. I heard. He looked at me steadily. It was not anyone from my pack. I know. And I did know, which was a strange thing. Calum, I need the communications. The direct correspondence between your father and the board member who signed the reassignment. If I have those, the timeline becomes clear and the case builds itself, but I cannot access private family records. The silence that followed was the kind that has real weight. He looked at the table, then at me, then somewhere past my shoulder at nothing. If those communications become public, he said, my father's standing in this community is finished. His relationship with the school board, his reputation. A pause. My family's position here. Yes, I said. I did not soften it. He deserved the honest version. You are asking me to hand you the weapon, he said. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the ventilation hum became noticeable. Long enough that I watched something work itself through in his expression. Not conflict exactly. More like a decision being approached from every angle before being made. I have been trying to get him to make this right for 2 years, he said. He kept telling me Kyle was compensated, that everything was handled fairly, and I wanted to believe him, because he is my father, and it is easier to believe that than to know what I actually know. He looked at me directly. I should not have believed him. That is on me. My throat felt tight in a way I had not expected. I will get you the correspondence, he said. Give me until Sunday. I will send everything. I stood. I started to reach for my bag. Ren. He had never used my first name before. I went still. Why did you come to me directly? He asked. You could have found another way. You are resourceful enough. I looked at him. The honest answer was sitting right there, inconvenient and clear. Because somewhere in the last 3 months, I said, you stopped being the person I came here to destroy and started being someone I could not do that to without asking first. I left before either of us could say anything else. Outside in the corridor, I pressed my back to the cold stone wall and breathed until my heartbeat settled. This was not part of the plan. Nothing about this was part of the plan. He sent the files on Saturday night at 11:43. I know the time because I was awake, sitting at my desk with my notebook open and my pen idle, pretending to review my research, but actually just waiting. The notification came through and I looked at the number of attached files, 47 emails, 3 formal documents, 1 audio recording, and I sat still for a moment before opening any of them. Then I started reading. It took me until 2 in the morning to get through everything. When I finished, I put my phone face down on the desk and sat in the dark and let the real shape of what had happened 3 years ago settle into place around me. Calum had pushed back. That was the thing I had not expected and could not immediately process. 18-year-old Calum Voss, the year my brother was at Crestfall, had written emails to his father that said things like, "This is not the right decision, and he earned that scholarship through his own work, not through our convenience, and I want no part in this, and I am asking you formally to reverse it." His father had replied to each one with the smooth, patient tone of a man who was used to being obeyed eventually. The last email in the chain, from Calum, was 4 words. I will not forgive you. His father had done it anyway. There were more emails after that. Calum trying to reach the school board directly, asking whether the process could be reviewed. The board telling him the matter was concluded and that pursuing it further would create institutional complications that would damage the school's donor relationships, which was a polite way of saying, "Your family gives us money. Do not bite the hand." There was one email, dated 6 weeks after Cale had withdrawn, where Calum had written to the board member directly. "I need to know that he is all right. I need to know someone has made sure of that." The reply was a form letter acknowledging receipt, and then nothing. Calum had gone quiet. Not because he stopped caring, I understood now, but because he was 18 and every institutional door had been closed in his face and he did not yet know what else to do. I understood that. I understood it more than I wanted to. I called Cale at 2:15 in the morning because there was no version of this where I did not call him the moment I understood it properly. He picked up on the second ring. "Ren." His voice was warm and a little sleepy. "It is 2 in the morning." "I know. I am sorry." I pressed my hand flat on the desk. "Kyle, I need to tell you something about Calum Voss." I told him everything. The emails, the complaint, the 4-word message that ended the chain. When I finished, there was a long pause and I could hear him breathing. "He tried to stop it," Cale said, slowly, like he was placing the information somewhere it fit. "Yes." Another pause. Then quietly, "Ren, you have been carrying so much anger for me for 3 years. You deserve someone to be angry. Maybe, but—" He stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle in the specific way Cale's voice got when he was about to say something important. "I am not angry anymore. I have not been for a while. I built a life. I am okay." A pause. "Are you okay?" I looked around my small dorm room. The worn blue notebook, the copied records, the plan that had carried me here and was now becoming something I did not fully recognize. "I do not know yet," I said honestly. "That is a real answer," Cale said. "I appreciate real answers from you. They are rare." I said goodnight and hung up. Sunday morning, I sent the documents to the school board's ethics office with a formal written request for a review of the Callaway academic record and the scholarship reassignment process. I carbon copied 2 education journalists who had previously covered institutional designation discrimination. I attached Calum's correspondence alongside the official records, framed as evidence that even internal objections had been suppressed. Then I sat and watched the day unfold. By evening, it had begun. A response from the board's ethics office requesting an emergency meeting. A message from one of the journalists confirming receipt. A public statement from the senior Voss's office that said nothing and confirmed everything by its very careful use of legal language. Calum did not text me. I did not text him. I did not know what to say, because the person I had arrived here to destroy had turned out to be someone who had tried to do the right thing at 18 years old and been crushed by an institution and a family bigger than him. And I had spent 3 months being furious at him, and also, somewhere underneath that, slowly falling for him, and I did not know how to hold all of that at once. On Sunday evening, there was a knock at my door. Calum was standing in the hallway. He looked tired in a way I had not seen before, not the controlled exhaustion he usually carried so neatly, but something more open than that. His tie was loose. His hair had escaped whatever product he used to keep it in order. He looked, for the first time since I had known him, like a person rather than a position. "My father called," he said. "He says I have betrayed the family." A beat. "He has formally removed me as Pack Alpha. Devon will take the role." I opened my mouth. "It is fine," he said before I could speak. "I chose it. I would choose it again." He looked at me with the direct, careful look that I had come to understand meant he was about to say something true. "I knew you were an Omega," he said. I have known since the second day. The floor felt slightly less solid than it had been. The cedar base in your scent blocker, he said. I have a younger cousin who is Omega. I recognize the compound. He paused. I did not say anything because I wanted to understand why you were here, and then because I wanted you to stay, and then because... He stopped, and then because of the library, and the east corridor, and the dance in the hallway, and I stopped having reasons that were about information. I stared at him. I lied to you, I said, about everything. I came here specifically to damage your reputation. I know. That is a terrible foundation. Yes, he said. And then, with something in his expression that was the quietest, most unguarded thing I had seen from him. But here we are anyway. The school board ethics meeting was on Monday at 9 in the morning. I had expected a fight. I had prepared for one, organized my documentation in order of escalating significance, practiced my statement 3 times, anticipated the likely objections. What I had not fully prepared for was how it would feel to actually sit in that room and say, out loud, the thing I had been carrying for 3 years. The boardroom had high ceilings and too many chairs, and the kind of formal table that existed specifically to make individuals feel small. I sat on one side with a counselor beside me and my documents in a folder on the table. Calum sat on the opposite side of the room, at a careful institutional distance, not looking at his family's legal representative, who was seated 2 chairs down from him. There were 8 board members. 3 of them looked troubled from the moment I walked in, which I took as a good sign. 2 looked guarded. 1 was openly hostile, which told me immediately which one had been in correspondence with the Voss family. I gave my statement. I kept it factual and direct. Dates, records, the pattern of what had happened to Cale's scholarship and his recommendation letters and his reputation. I quoted the donor relations note verbatim. I presented the timeline showing the decisions had been made while Calum was absent from campus. Then Calum gave his statement. He spoke for 11 minutes. I counted without meaning to. His voice was steady throughout, which I suspected cost him more than he showed. He acknowledged his family's role clearly and without evasion. He presented his own correspondence from 3 years ago, the objections, the complaint, the attempts to reach the board afterward. Not as an excuse, he said, but as part of the full record. He did not look at me once during those 11 minutes. When he finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. The hostile board member started to object. One of the troubled ones interrupted him. The meeting became an argument between board members that had apparently been building for some time, and the counselor beside me leaned over and said quietly, "This is going the right way." It took 2 hours. At the end of it, the board chair said that the preliminary findings clearly supported a review and that the Callaway academic record would be formally reassessed within 14 days. The scholarship reassignment from 3 years prior would be investigated by an external ethics examiner. The donor relations note would be added to the official record. The counselor squeezed my shoulder. I sat very still and let it land. Outside on the steps afterward, I called Cale. "It worked," I said when he picked up. A pause. Then, "Ren." His voice did something complicated. "It actually worked." "It actually worked," I confirmed. He laughed. A real, full, free laugh that I had not heard from him in years, and something inside me that had been held closed for a very long time opened quietly. I pressed my free hand to my mouth and breathed. "Thank you," he said. "You ridiculous, stubborn, impossible person. Thank you. Do not thank me. It was not clean. It was messy and it took longer than it should have. The best things usually do." A pause. Ren, go live your life now. That is an order from your older brother. I hung up and sat on the stone steps in the pale winter sun and let myself feel the weight of what had changed. The anger that had been my architecture for 3 years was not gone. I did not think it would disappear clean like a light switching off, but it had lost its sharpness. It had become something softer and more tired. I had done what I came here to do. What was left now was everything else. I heard footsteps and did not need to look up to know who they belonged to. Caleb sat down beside me on the steps. He left a small gap between us, deliberate and respectful, and sat with his elbows on his knees and his eyes on the courtyard below. "How is your brother?" he asked. "Relieved. He told me to go live my life." "Good advice. He is the wise one between us." I paused. "Are you all right? After the meeting?" He was quiet for a moment. "My father has not spoken to me since yesterday. The legal representative kept trying to make eye contact with me in there. I did not let him." A pause. "It is strange, doing the right thing. I thought it would feel more resolved." "It feels raw," I said, "and then it settles." He looked at me. "You speak from experience. I have been angry for 3 years. I know what it feels like when the anger runs out and you have to figure out what is underneath." "What is underneath?" he asked, quietly, like he genuinely wanted to know. I thought about it. The real answer. "I think just me," I said. "Myself, without the mission, which is new and a little frightening." He nodded slowly. Something in his expression was the same. That same openness he had shown in the doorway the night before, the face beneath the one he wore to school every day. "I owe your brother more than an investigation outcome," he said. "He knows that. He is also the kind of person who will not hold it over you." "I know. That somehow makes it worse." He exhaled. "I was 18. I told myself there was nothing else I could do. I am not certain I tried hard enough." "You were 18, I said. "The institution had decided, the adults had decided. You filed a complaint and they rejected it in 48 hours. What else were you supposed to do?" He looked at me. "You are defending me," he said. "I am being accurate. You came here to destroy me 3 months ago." "People can update their positions," I said, "when they receive new information." Something in him shifted. Not quite a smile, but the thing that came right before one. He looked back at the courtyard. "I am no longer a pack alpha," he said. "My family is furious. My position here will be very different." "How do you feel about that?" "Honest," he said simply. "For the first time in a while, the things around me are actually what they appear to be. That is better than comfortable." I looked at him, and I thought, there it is. There is the thing I kept trying not to see. 3 weeks later, Cale came to Crestfall. He had told me he was coming the week before, and I had spent 7 days trying not to build it up too much in my head. It had been 3 years since he walked these grounds. I did not know whether it would feel like closure or like opening an old wound, and I had learned enough by now to stop predicting what feelings would do. He arrived on a Saturday morning, when the campus was quiet and the winter light came in, flat and pale, through the arched stone entrance. I met him at the gate. He was wearing a yellow scarf and he had his hands in his pockets, and when he looked up at the school building, his expression was the one he always wore when he was feeling something he was not yet ready to name. "Smaller than I remembered," he said. "You were carrying it like it was enormous," I said. He looked at me sidelong. "When did you get wise?" "I've had some unusual conversations recently." He laughed and put his arm around my shoulders briefly, and we walked in together. The academic dean met us in the administration building's small, formal sitting room. Not the boardroom, something more human than that, and presented Cale with the corrected scholarship record on official school letterhead and the written apology from the board, and a note from the ethics examiner confirming that the external review had formally validated the original results from 3 years prior. Cale's name in the official records restored. He accepted it all with the grace that had always been specifically his, thanking people in the measured, warm way he had. And I stood slightly to the side and watched him, and felt proud in a way that had nothing to do with what I had done and everything to do with who he was. Outside afterward, in the courtyard, he finally let himself cry for a few minutes. I stood next to him and did not say anything, because there was nothing useful to say, and Cale did not need words for this particular moment, just someone beside him. When he wiped his face, he laughed a little. "Right," he said. "Okay. That is done." "That is done," I agreed. He looked across the courtyard. Caleb was standing at a careful distance near the library steps. He had seen us arrive. It was impossible to miss, and had positioned himself there with the specific quality of presence that I had come to recognize as his way of being available without imposing. Visible, but not in the way. The Kylam way. "That is him," Cale said. Not a question. "That is him." My brothers studied Caleb for a quiet moment, with the evaluating eye of someone who had studied people his whole life as a matter of survival. "He looks like exactly the kind of person you would fall for," Cale said. "All that difficulty, all that carefully held integrity, the kind of person who does the right thing very quietly and then stands in your courtyard 3 weeks later making sure you were all right without actually inserting himself into the moment." He tilted his head. "Secretly decent. You have always been helpless against secretly decent." "I have not fallen for anyone," I said out of reflex. Kel turned and looked at my face with the full attention of a person who knows you completely. I closed my mouth. "Maybe," I admitted. He squeezed my shoulder once, warm and firm. "Go," he said. "I'm going to walk around this place and make my own peace with it at my own pace. I do not need you to hold my hand for that part." He nodded across the courtyard. "Go." I went. The distance across the courtyard was not long, but it felt significant in the way that some short distances do, like crossing a line you have been standing in front of for a long time. Caleb watched me come without moving, which was so exactly him that it almost made me smile. He waited until I stopped in front of him. "Hi," I said. "Hi," he said. "My brother thinks I'm gone for you." Something moved in his eyes, quick and warm, like light through water. "Your brother sounds perceptive." "He is. He is also unbearable about it." I looked at him. "I should tell you something. I want to say it clearly because I have spent a lot of time recently not saying the clear thing, and I am trying to stop doing that." He waited. "When I arrived here," I said, "I had one purpose, and it was not you. It was what you represented. And somewhere along the way that changed, and I kept arguing with myself about it because it was inconvenient and complicated, and I had a plan. And I am someone who believes in having a plan." I breathed, but Cale told me to go live my life, and living my life means being honest about what I actually feel instead of filing it under strategic complications and moving on. Caleb was very still, the way he went still when he was paying close attention. "I want to try," I said. "This, whatever this is. I want to try it as myself. Actual self, Omega, Ren, the whole thing, and not as the person I came here pretending to be." He looked at me for a moment. The kind of look that takes inventory not of what you are presenting, but of what you actually are. Then he reached out slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His hand stayed at the side of my face for a moment. Warm, careful, the way you hold something you do not want to drop. "Tell me something true," he said softly. "I think about you constantly, and it is deeply inconvenient, and I have tried to talk myself out of it multiple times, and it has never once worked." Something opened in his expression. And then Calum Voss, composed, precise, silver-eyed, the person I had spent 3 years turning into a symbol of everything I hated, smiled. A real one. Full and unhurried, rewriting his whole face into something that was just warm. Genuinely, simply warm. It hit me square in the chest. "Something true from me," he said. "From the moment you walked into the East Corridor and argued with me about the archive indexing system, with your eyes giving away everything your face was hiding, I have wanted you to stay." "That is a very strange beginning to a feeling," I said. "You were so angry and so careful about hiding it and so completely unable to stop being exactly yourself anyway." He tilted his head slightly. "I find genuine things compelling. You are the most genuinely yourself person I have ever met, even when you were pretending to be someone else." I stared at him. "This is going to be complicated," I said. "Your family, my fake designation, the entire school watching whatever this is." "Yes. People are going to have opinions." "They always do," he said. "I stopped managing other people's opinions when I sent you those files. It was actually very freeing." A pause. "Do you want to keep listing the complications? Or—" "No," I said. "I think I am done listing." He held out his hand. I looked at it. Palm up, open, not a command or a pull, but an offer. The simplest thing. I thought about Cale's voice on the phone. "Go live your life." I thought about 3 years of anger and one season of slowly, helplessly changing my mind. I thought about amber light and cedar and 1 second in a hallway where something cracked open that I had never quite managed to close back up. Ren Calloway, Omega, former undercover operative, person who had arrived at this school with a worn blue notebook full of plans and absolutely no intention of feeling anything. Took Calum Voss's hand. It was warm, real, completely unambiguous. A beginning, a proper one. Not built on plans or anger or pretending. Just two people standing in a winter courtyard, deciding to start from the truth. And honestly, it felt better than any plan I had ever made. It felt like something I was going to want to keep.